My name is Amber Reynolds, and I'm 32 years old. 3 months before our wedding, my fiancé Ryan Clark called everything off. The devastating reason? His mother Elaine convinced him I wasn't good enough for their family. After 3 years together and months of planning our perfect day, he chose his mother's approval over our love. The day I moved my things out of our apartment, Elaine cornered me. "You're nothing without my son. He can do so much better," she hissed. I just laughed and walked away. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to rise above someone who tried to break you. Ryan and I met 4 years ago at a charity fundraiser for children's literacy. I was there representing my design agency, which had donated promotional materials for the event. He was attending with his investment firm, one of the major sponsors. Our eyes met across the room in that cliché way you read about in romance novels, but never expect to experience yourself. He was tall with dark hair and the kindest blue eyes I'd ever seen. When he smiled, I felt something shift inside me, like my heart recognized him before my mind caught up. We talked for hours that night, ignoring the speeches and auction. It turned out we had attended rival colleges, loved the same obscure indie band, and both dreamed of traveling to New Zealand someday. The conversation flowed so naturally that when the event ended, it felt like we'd been interrupted mid-sentence in a conversation that had been going on for years. Ryan worked as a financial analyst at Mercer Investment Partners, one of the top firms in Boston. He was brilliant with numbers and had a way of explaining complex financial concepts that made them accessible to anyone. I admired his intelligence and ambition. As for me, I'd built a career as a graphic designer, starting at a major agency before breaking off to join a boutique firm where I had more creative freedom. My specialty was brand identity, helping companies tell their stories visually. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant where the owner knew Ryan by name. By our third date, I was already imagining a future with him. By our fifth, he was introducing me to his friends. Everything moved quickly, but nothing felt rushed. It was as if we were simply following a path that had always been laid out for us. For the first 2 years, our relationship was practically perfect. We rarely fought, and when we did, we resolved things quickly. We supported each other's careers, celebrated each other's successes, and provided comfort during setbacks. We took weekend trips to the coast, spent lazy Sundays reading together, and hosted dinner parties for our merged friend groups. I'd never been happier or more certain about anyone. The proposal came during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. Ryan had arranged a private wine tasting at a picturesque vineyard. As the sun was setting over the rolling hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, he got down on one knee. The ring was vintage-inspired with a center diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires, exactly the style I would have chosen for myself. I said yes before he even finished asking the question, and we spent the rest of the evening calling our loved ones and celebrating. Planning our wedding became a joyful project. We secured a historic venue for the following spring, chose a menu that reflected our favorite foods, and spent weekends searching for the perfect details. Ryan was involved in every decision, unusual for most grooms, but perfectly in character for him. We envisioned a celebration that was elegant, but not stuffy, meaningful, but still fun. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs about Ryan's mother Elaine from our very first meeting. She was polite but distant, her smile never quite reaching her eyes when she looked at me. She asked questions about my family and background that felt more like an interrogation than genuine interest. When I mentioned that my parents were both teachers, something flickered across her face, disappointment, perhaps, or judgment. "Teachers are so important," she said with a thin smile. "Such a noble profession, even if it's not particularly lucrative." Ryan dismissed my concerns later. "Mom's just protective," he explained. "She's been that way since Dad died. She'll warm up to you, I promise." I believed him and doubled my efforts to win Elaine over. I brought thoughtful gifts when we visited, offered to help with family events, remembered her birthday with carefully chosen presents. I thought that with time and effort, she'd see how much I loved her son and how happy we were together. My best friend Jessica Walker saw through it all immediately. After meeting Elaine at our engagement party, Jessica pulled me aside. "That woman is never going to accept you," she warned. "She looks at Ryan like he's her property, not her son." I laughed it off. "She's just old-fashioned. She'll come around." Jessica wasn't convinced. "Just be careful. Mother-in-law issues have sunk stronger relationships than yours." I should have listened. Instead, I remained optimistic, convinced that love would be enough. I had no idea that Elaine was merely setting the stage for the devastation to come. As our wedding date grew closer, Elaine's interference became impossible to ignore. What started as subtle disapproval evolved into active sabotage of our wedding plans. When we chose a sophisticated vineyard venue that reflected our first vacation together, Elaine suggested we should instead use her country club, where all the Clark weddings have been held for generations. Every decision became a battleground. The flowers I selected were common, my choice of photographer amateur, and the menu trying too hard to be unique. During a cake tasting, she brought along her friend who was a professional event planner to critique everything from the flavor combinations to the proposed decorations. "Darling," she told Ryan while I sat right beside him, "you don't want something people will remember for being unusual. You want elegance. Tradition." What hurt most was watching Ryan's reactions evolve. Initially, he defended my choices and reminded his mother that it was our wedding. But gradually, he began to hesitate, to look to her for approval, to suggest compromises that always seemed to favor her vision over ours. The exclusions began subtly. I'd hear about family dinners after they happened, with Ryan explaining, "Mom said she tried to call you but couldn't reach you." When his cousin got engaged, everyone but me received an invitation to the celebration. "Must have been lost in the mail," Elaine said with unconvincing concern when I mentioned it. Then came the setup attempts. Ryan's childhood friend Marcus came to dinner with his new girlfriend Brittany. I noticed how Elaine fawned over the girl, asking about her family's summer home and commenting on her good breeding. Later, I overheard her telling Ryan, "Now that's the kind of girl I always imagined you with." The revelation came during an unexpected visit to Elaine's home. Ryan had forgotten some documents and asked me to pick them up from his mother while he was stuck in a meeting. I arrived to find Elaine in her sitting room with photos spread across the table, beautiful young women in elegant settings, their faces vaguely familiar. "Who are these people?" I asked, startling her. She recovered quickly. "Just some daughters of my friends. Lovely girls from good families." She gathered the photos, but not before I recognized several of them from stories Ryan had told me, girls his mother had tried to set him up with before we met. The most tense confrontation came during a family dinner 6 months before the wedding. Elaine spent the evening questioning me about my people, where my grandparents had come from, what schools my parents had attended, whether anyone in my family had made a name for themselves. "I'm just trying to understand where you come from, dear," she said sweetly when I finally called her out on the interrogation. Family background is so important for compatibility. That night, for the first time, Ryan didn't defend me at all. He sat silently, studying his plate, as his mother systematically dismantled my family's worth in the most polite terms possible. In bed that night, I confronted him. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Mom's just old-fashioned," he replied, echoing his usual excuse. "She doesn't mean anything by it." "She was practically calling my family worthless," I insisted. Ryan sighed. "You're being too sensitive. That's just how she talks." That moment marked a shift in our relationship. For the first time, I felt truly alone while lying next to him. I confided everything in Jessica, who didn't bother to hide her concern. "This is not going to get better after you're married," she warned. "It's going to get worse." My parents noticed too. During our monthly dinner with them, my father pulled me aside. "Sweetheart, are you happy? Really happy? Because your mother and I don't like what we're seeing." I assured them everything was fine, that every couple had challenges, that we would work through it. But in private moments, I began to wonder if I was making a terrible mistake. In a last-ditch effort to improve relations, I invited Elaine to lunch, just the two of us. I chose her favorite restaurant, dressed conservatively, and prepared to extend an olive branch. For the first hour, things seemed to be going well. She told stories about Ryan's childhood, and I shared my excitement about our future together. Then she placed her hand over mine, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Amber, dear, I want you to know that I appreciate how much you care for Ryan. But I do worry that you might not fully understand the life he's meant for. The Clark name carries certain expectations. I just want what's best for him. The implied message was clear. I wasn't what was best for him. I wasn't good enough. I drove home from that lunch with tears streaming down my face, realizing that nothing I could do would ever make this woman accept me. The question was whether Ryan would choose me anyway. The shift in Ryan was subtle at first. Missed calls, late nights at the office, distracted conversations. 3 months before our wedding, with invitations addressed and deposits paid, the distance between us became impossible to ignore. When I reached for him in bed, he would gently move away. When I asked about wedding details, his answers became vague and non-committal. Is everything okay? I finally asked one night over dinner. You seem elsewhere lately. Just work stress, he replied, not meeting my eyes. But I knew it was more than that. I could feel him slipping away, like sand through my fingers. The evidence appeared on a Tuesday. I was taking out the trash when I noticed torn paper in the bin. Curiosity made me look closer, and my stomach dropped. They were our wedding invitations, at least a dozen of them, ripped to pieces. These weren't extras or mistakes. They included addresses of his close friends and family members. That evening, I placed the torn pieces on our dining table and waited for him to come home. When he saw them, his face went pale. What is this, Ryan? My voice was steady despite the panic rising in my chest. He sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. I was going to talk to you tonight. I've been having doubts. Doubts? The word felt like a physical blow. 3 months before our wedding, you're having doubts? It's not sudden, he said. I've been thinking about it for a while. I'm just not sure we're right for each other. When did you decide this? Was it before or after we put down non-refundable deposits? Before or after I chose my dress? Before or after we sent save the dates to 200 people? His eyes couldn't meet mine. I should have said something sooner. I just didn't know how. Why, Ryan? What changed? The silence stretched between us, heavy with all the things he wasn't saying. Finally, he spoke. My mother thinks we're making a mistake. There it was, the truth I'd been dreading. Your mother thinks? What about what you think? She's made some good points. About our backgrounds, our futures. About compatibility. Compatibility? I echoed. We've been together for 3 years. We live together. We're planning a life together. She thinks we want different things. That eventually, it will cause problems. And what do you think? He looked at me then, and I saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke. I think she might be right. You're not what I always imagined for my future. The pain was physical, like being stabbed. What does that even mean? My family has expectations. Traditions. My father married someone from a similar background. His father too. So I'm not good enough because my parents are teachers instead of investment bankers? Because I didn't go to an Ivy League school? Because we don't have a summer home? It's not just that. It's the whole package. Mom says. I don't care what your mother says. I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. I care what you say. Is this really coming from you, or is it coming from her? He couldn't answer, which was answer enough. The next day, he moved his things out while I was at work. He left the engagement ring on our dresser with a note that said simply, I'm sorry. You deserve someone who's sure. The cruelest moment came a week later when I went to collect the last of my things from our apartment. Elaine was there, supervising the cleaning crew preparing for Ryan's return. When she saw me, her expression shifted from surprise to something like triumph. Amber, she said, as if we were meeting for tea. I was going to call you. I wanted to say how sorry I am things didn't work out. Please don't, I replied, focusing on packing my books. She continued as if I hadn't spoken. It's better this way, before the wedding. Before you both made a terrible mistake. I said nothing, determined to get through this with my dignity intact. The truth is, she said, following me around the apartment, Ryan needs someone who understands his world. his potential. His family expects certain things. When I continued to ignore her, her tone sharpened. You're nothing without my son, you know. He can do so much better. Do you think anyone else of his caliber would have looked twice at someone like you? Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I looked at this bitter, controlling woman and suddenly saw her for exactly what she was, pathetic. I started to laugh. Her face contorted in confusion. What's so funny? You, I said simply. You're so terrified of losing control of your son that you'd rather see him miserable than happy with someone you didn't choose. I picked up my last box and walked to the door. Congratulations, Elaine. You won. I hope it was worth it. The aftermath was a blur of painful tasks. Calling vendors to cancel arrangements, returning gifts, telling friends and family that the wedding was off, explaining over and over that yes, it was sudden, and no, there wasn't another woman, just a man who couldn't stand up to his mother. The hardest call was to my parents, who had been saving for years to give me the wedding of my dreams. My mother cried. My father was silent for a long time before saying, his loss, sweetheart. His tremendous loss. The dress I'd spent months searching for hung in my closet like a ghost. I couldn't bear to look at it, but I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it either. It represented everything I'd lost, not just Ryan, but the future I'd planned, the life I'd expected, the family I'd almost become part of. The night our wedding invitations had been scheduled to go out, I sat alone in my new apartment, a sterile, temporary place I'd found in a rush, and allowed myself to fall apart completely. I screamed. I sobbed. I threw things. I collapsed on the floor and wondered how I would ever put myself back together again. The first weeks after the breakup were the darkest of my life. I moved through my days like a ghost, going through the motions, but feeling nothing. I called in sick to work more often than I showed up. When I did make it to the office, I stared at my computer screen, unable to generate a single creative thought. My boss, Greg Thompson, was understanding at first, but his concerned glances told me his patience had limits. Sleep became both my enemy and my only escape. At night, I'd lie awake replaying every moment with Ryan, searching for signs I'd missed, wondering what I could have done differently. When exhaustion finally pulled me under, I'd dream of him, only to wake with fresh pain. I stopped answering calls from anyone but Jessica and my parents. I canceled plans, withdrew from friends, and lived on delivery food eaten straight from containers. Jessica, bless her, refused to let me disappear completely. 2 weeks after the breakup, she showed up at my apartment with a suitcase. I'm staying until you stop looking like a walking corpse, she announced, pushing past me. She opened curtains, threw away rotting takeout containers, and stripped my unmade bed. This isn't you, Amber. I'm not expecting you to be fine, but I'm not letting you drown either. Having Jessica there forced me into some semblance of routine. She made sure I showered, ate actual meals, and left the apartment at least once a day, even if just for a walk around the block. In the evenings, she let me cry on her shoulder while we watched mindless TV. My parents drove 3 hours every weekend to check on me. They brought home-cooked meals, helped clean my apartment, and sat with me in patient silence when I couldn't find words for my pain. My father, not usually demonstrative, hugged me for a long time each visit. You'll get through this, he'd whisper. You're stronger than you know. My mother was more practical. She brought organizational bins to help me sort through the remnants of my shared life with Ryan. She didn't flinch when I alternated between sobbing over a coffee mug he'd given me and raging about his weakness. Feel it all, she advised. Don't push it away. The only way out is through. Work became another unexpected source of support. When I finally confessed to my boss what had happened, his response surprised me. Take the time you need, Greg said. Your job will be here. You're too valuable to lose over some mama's boy who couldn't see what he had. He arranged for my projects to be covered and approved a month of paid leave, a policy that didn't officially exist, but that he created for me. When you're ready to come back, you'll come back stronger, he assured me. Creative people need to process grief. It will make your work deeper. With time stretching before me and concerned loved ones watching, I took a step that felt impossible but necessary. I found a therapist. Dr. Helen Winters specialized in relationship trauma and betrayal. In her calm office with its view of a Japanese maple tree, I began the messy work of processing what had happened. "What hurts most?" she asked in our first session. That I wasn't enough, I replied immediately. That his mother could see I wasn't enough, and eventually he saw it too. Dr. Winter's response was gentle but firm. "Or perhaps what hurts most is that you chose someone who wasn't strong enough to recognize your worth. Someone whose judgment was so compromised that he valued his mother's opinion over his own happiness." That reframing, that perhaps the failure was his, not mine, felt revolutionary. We began exploring my tendency to seek validation from others, traced back to childhood experiences of always trying to be the good girl. We examined why I had ignored red flags with Ryan and how I might recognize similar patterns in the future. Between therapy sessions, I started journaling, pouring out raw, unfiltered thoughts that I couldn't share with anyone else. I wrote angry letters to Ryan that I never sent. I documented small victories, like the first day I didn't cry or the first time I laughed genuinely at something Jessica said. Physical movement became another healing tool. I started with short walks that gradually lengthened into hikes in a nearby state park. There was something about putting one foot in front of another, feeling my body's strength, that reminded me I could move forward. On Dr. Winter's recommendation, I joined a support group for people healing from relationship betrayal. The first meeting, I sat silently, overwhelmed by the stories around me. But there was comfort in knowing I wasn't alone, that others had survived similar or worse betrayals and were rebuilding their lives. As weeks passed, I began making small changes to reclaim my space and identity. I rearranged furniture in my apartment, painted an accent wall a bold teal color, and hung art that Ryan had always disliked. I cut my long hair into a stylish bob that made me feel lighter and somehow more myself. I purged my closet of clothes I'd bought to please him or his mother, rediscovering my own style in the process. My first public appearance post-breakup came at my college friend Mia Simmons' birthday celebration. I almost canceled 3 times that day, panicked at the thought of facing questions and pitying looks. Jessica practically dragged me out the door. "You don't have to stay long," she promised. "But you need to rip off the Band-Aid." Walking into the restaurant, I felt like everyone was staring, though logically I knew they weren't. Mia hugged me tightly, whispered, "I'm so glad you came," and then, mercifully, treated me normally. By the end of the night, I'd had meaningful conversations, laughed genuinely, and felt, for brief moments, like myself again. That evening emboldened me to reconnect with other friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Ryan. I discovered that many had seen what I couldn't, how I dimmed my light to accommodate him and his family. My college roommate Rachel Foster confessed she'd never liked how I walked on eggshells around him. My childhood friend Tyler Morgan admitted he'd been worried about how isolated I'd become. The pivotal moment in my early recovery came during a solo weekend trip to the mountains. My therapist had suggested a brief retreat, time alone in nature to reflect on where I'd been and where I wanted to go. In a small cabin with a view of pine-covered slopes, I spent hours sitting on the porch, walking forest trails, and writing in my journal. On the final morning, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold, I had a moment of perfect clarity. I didn't miss Ryan anymore. I missed the idea of him, the future I'd planned, but not the man who had betrayed me so completely. For the first time, I felt genuine gratitude that the wedding hadn't happened. I had escaped a lifetime of being judged and found wanting. I drove home with the windows down, singing along to power anthems, feeling the first stirrings of excitement about the blank canvas my life had become. The pain wasn't gone, but it had transformed into something useful, a lesson, a tool for building something better. Returning to work after my leave, I approached my job with a newfound intensity. Freed from constantly considering Ryan's schedule and preferences, I poured myself into projects that had once taken a backseat to wedding planning and family obligations. My designs became bolder, my concepts more innovative, and my presentations more confident. 2 months after returning, a major opportunity landed on my desk, rebranding a struggling local cosmetics company that wanted to expand nationally. In my pre-breakup life, I might have played it safe with their branding. Instead, I developed a concept that was striking and unconventional. In the presentation meeting, the client's CEO looked uncertain. "It's different from what we discussed," she said carefully. "It is," I acknowledged. "But here's why it works." I proceeded to explain my thinking with such conviction that by the end, she was nodding enthusiastically. "This is exactly what we need," she decided. Something that forces people to see us differently. The campaign launched to widespread industry praise. My boss Greg called me into his office after the first week of metrics showed dramatic increases in the client's social media engagement and online sales. "This is exceptional work, Amber," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Which is why I want to discuss this with you." Inside was a promotion offer to Senior Creative Director, a position I hadn't expected to reach for at least another 3 years. The salary increase was substantial, nearly doubling my current income. "Are you sure?" I asked, stunned. "I've only been back full-time for a few months." "The truth is, you're doing the best work of your career," Greg replied. "Sometimes going through hell burns away the hesitation and fear that holds us back creatively. Whatever happened with that relationship, it unlocked something in you. We'd be fools not to recognize and reward that." The promotion changed everything. Suddenly, I was leading a team, mentoring junior designers, and working directly with our most prestigious clients. The responsibilities were daunting, but I thrived under the pressure, finding satisfaction in challenges that would have overwhelmed me before. With my increased income, I began looking for a permanent home to replace my temporary apartment. The real estate agent showed me several nice, but safe options before I spotted a listing online, a historic loft in a converted factory building, with exposed brick walls, industrial windows, and a rooftop garden. It was bold, unique, and completely different from the traditional brownstone Ryan and I had planned to buy. "It's at the top of your budget," the agent warned when I requested a viewing. "Show me anyway," I replied. The moment I walked in, I knew it was mine. 2 weeks later, I signed the closing documents, becoming a first-time homeowner on my own terms. The feeling of unlocking the door to my own space, one that had never contained Ryan or his influence, was indescribably empowering. My creativity continued expanding beyond work. I started teaching a night class in brand identity at the local community college, discovering an unexpected passion for education. My students' enthusiasm and fresh perspectives energized me in ways I hadn't anticipated. "You should document your teaching methods," suggested Lisa, a fellow instructor. "There's nothing quite like your approach in the current design literature." That casual comment sparked another venture, a design blog where I shared case studies, techniques, and insights from my professional experience. I expected perhaps a few dozen followers, mostly my students. Instead, the blog rapidly gained traction in the design community, attracting thousands of subscribers within months. The blog's success led to an invitation that would have terrified me in my previous life. Speaking at the East Coast Design Conference, a prestigious annual event attended by industry leaders. Public speaking had always been my greatest fear, but the new Amber, the one forged in betrayal and recovery, decided to face it head-on. I spent weeks preparing my presentation on authentic branding in the digital age, practicing in front of Jessica, my colleagues, and eventually my community college class. When the day arrived, my hands shook as I stepped onto the stage. But once I began speaking, a strange calm settled over me. I was sharing knowledge I was passionate about, connecting with an audience who valued what I had to say. The applause afterward was thunderous. More importantly, a line of people waited to speak with me, to exchange cards, to discuss collaboration opportunities. Among them was Nathan Davis, a college friend I'd lost touch with years ago, now the founder of Technova, a successful software company. "That was brilliant," he said, hugging me. "Exactly what I've been trying to explain to my marketing team for months. Please tell me you're available for freelance work." Over coffee the next day, Nathan explained his situation. Technova had grown rapidly, but their branding hadn't kept pace with their evolution. They needed a complete overhaul before their next funding round. "I have a marketing department, but they're too close to it," he explained. "I need an outside perspective." Someone who can see what we should be, not just what we've been. The project fee he proposed was larger than any I'd ever handled, enough to furnish my entire loft and still have money left for investments. More importantly, it was the kind of high-profile project that could establish me as an independent force in the design world. "I have to warn you," I said. "I don't play it safe anymore." Nathan grinned. "That's exactly why I want to work with you." The Technova project consumed my evenings and weekends for 2 months, but the results exceeded even my expectations. At the launch party, Nathan raised a toast to me as the visionary who saw our company more clearly than we saw ourselves. Representatives from 3 other tech startups approached me that night, asking for my business card and availability. Financial security followed my professional success. For the first time in my life, I had not just enough but more than enough. I started an investment account, maxed out my retirement contributions, and still had funds to travel and enjoy my new life. The contrast with Ryan's family's assumption that I needed their son's financial stability was not lost on me. As my career flourished, an unexpected development emerged in my personal life. At a client dinner, I was seated next to James Bennett, the architect who had designed the restaurant's award-winning space. Tall with warm brown eyes and an easy laugh, he was clearly talented but refreshingly humble about his work. "The true test isn't what critics say," he told me over dessert. "It's how people feel in the space. Are they comfortable? Inspired? That's what matters." We talked design principles until the restaurant closed, then continued our conversation over drinks at a nearby bar. There was no mistaking the attraction between us, but unlike my whirlwind beginning with Ryan, this developed slowly. James asked for my number, but waited 3 days to call. Our first date was at an art exhibition, followed by dinner at a hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese place he loved. What struck me most was how different I felt with him, how fully myself. I didn't monitor my words or modify my opinions. I didn't worry about whether his family would approve of me. I simply enjoyed his company and the genuine connection we were forming. After our third date, he kissed me goodnight at my door, and for the first time since the breakup, I felt that spark of possibility. Not a replacement for what I'd lost, but something new and potentially better, a relationship based on mutual respect and authentic appreciation rather than expectations and appearances. "I'd like to see you again," he said simply. "I'd like that too," I replied, and meant it. 6 months after Ryan ended our engagement, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Assuming it was a work call, I answered professionally. "Amber? It's Elaine. Elaine Clark." The sound of her voice sent a jolt through me. For a moment, I considered hanging up, but curiosity won out. "What can I do for you, Elaine?" My tone was polite but distant. I was just calling to check in," she said, her usual confidence noticeably absent. "See how you're doing." "I'm doing well, thank you." I offered nothing more. That's good to hear." An awkward pause followed. "Ryan asks about you sometimes." "Does he?" I replied neutrally. "Yes, he hopes you're happy." "Please tell him I am." "Was there something specific you needed?" "No, just checking in." "Take care, Amber." I stared at my phone after she hung up, puzzled by the strange interaction. I mentioned it to Jessica over lunch the next day. "That's weird," she agreed. The Ice Queen doesn't make social calls, especially to exes she considered beneath her son. "Maybe she feels guilty," I suggested. Jessica snorted. "That woman doesn't have the capacity for guilt. Something's up." I put the call out of my mind until 2 weeks later when my friend Marcus, who still worked with Ryan, called with gossip. "Did you hear about Ryan?" he asked without preamble. "No, what about him?" "He got fired. Made a huge mistake on the Westover account. Cost the firm millions. They let him go last week." I felt a strange mix of emotions, shock, a twinge of satisfaction, but also an unexpected pang of sympathy. Ryan's job had been his identity. "That's tough," I said finally. "Is he okay?" "Not really. Between that and the breakup, he's pretty much a mess. He's drinking too much, from what I hear." 3 days later, Elaine called again. This time, her voice had an edge of desperation. "Amber, I was wondering if you'd be willing to meet for coffee. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you." "I don't think that's a good idea, Elaine." Please, she said, the words sounding foreign in her mouth. It's important. Whatever you need to say, you can say over the phone. She sighed. Ryan's going through a difficult time. He made a mistake at work and… I interrupted. I'm sorry about that, but I don't see what it has to do with me. He misses you, she blurted out. He realizes now that he made a terrible mistake. I laughed, I couldn't help it. And you're calling me because… Because he's too proud to do it himself, she admitted. But he's suffering, Amber. He had to move back home. He's not eating, barely sleeping. Again, I'm sorry to hear that. But that doesn't have anything to do with me. Don't you care at all? She asked, indignation creeping back into her tone. I did care, Elaine. I cared deeply. But Ryan made his choice and I've moved on. After that call, they came more frequently, sometimes from Elaine, sometimes from unknown numbers I began to recognize as hers. I stopped answering, but the voicemails piled up. Ryan's asking about you again. He saw your company's billboard downtown and was so proud. He's not doing well, Amber. He needs closure. The most shocking message came after I'd ignored half a dozen calls. I was wrong, Elaine's voice wavered. I was wrong about you, about everything. Ryan made the biggest mistake of his life listening to me, and now he's paying for it. We both are. Please call me back. Meanwhile, mutual friends reported that Ryan had been asking about me, whether I was seeing anyone, if I seemed happy, if I ever mentioned him. I learned he'd been driving by my office occasionally, hoping to accidentally run into me. The situation came to a head on a Tuesday morning when I stopped at my favorite coffee shop before work. I was waiting for my order when I heard someone call my name. Turning, I found Elaine standing behind me, immaculately dressed as always, but with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. Amber, she said again. What a coincidence. It clearly wasn't a coincidence. This coffee shop was 20 minutes from her home. Elaine, I acknowledged with a nod. Excuse me, I need to get to work. Please, she said, touching my arm. Just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat at a small table in the corner, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. You look well, she finally said. Very well, in fact. Thank you. What did you want to talk about? She twisted her wedding ring nervously. Ryan's life has fallen apart since the engagement ended. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you don't understand. Everything has fallen apart. His job, his friendships, his health. He's a shell of himself. That sounds difficult, I said neutrally. I hope he gets help. He doesn't need help, he needs you. The words burst out of her, drawing glances from nearby tables. She lowered her voice. He made a terrible mistake listening to me. I made a terrible mistake interfering. I studied her face, noting the genuine distress there. Why are you telling me this? Because I was wrong about you, she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. You were the best thing that ever happened to my son, and I ruined it because of my own stupid prejudices and need for control. The admission I'd once desperately wanted now felt hollow. Ryan moved back home, she continued. He lost his job, his apartment, everything. He drinks too much, barely leaves his room. All he talks about is you, what he lost, how he should have stood up to me. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, vindication, but also sadness for the broken family before me. I'm sorry for what you're going through, I said carefully. But Ryan and I are over. He made his choice. He made the wrong choice. Tears were streaming down her face now, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run. We both did. Please, Amber. Would you consider talking to him? Giving him another chance? No, I said gently but firmly. I can't do that. He loves you, she insisted. He's always loved you. Love isn't enough, Elaine. Respect is essential too, and Ryan didn't respect me enough to stand by me. I deserve better than that. Please, she was openly sobbing now, a sight I could never have imagined 6 months ago. I'm begging you. Take him back. He's my only child, and I can't bear to see him suffering like this. I reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. I truly am sorry. But I've built a new life, one that doesn't include Ryan. I hope you both find healing. As I stood to leave, she grabbed my wrist. What can I do? What can I say to change your mind? Nothing, I replied simply. And that's the consequence of the choice you both made. Walking away from Elaine's broken sobs was difficult but necessary. I felt no joy in her pain, but I recognized the importance of maintaining the boundaries I'd established. The old Amber might have crumbled, might have rushed back to comfort Ryan and try to fix what was broken. The new Amber knew that wasn't my responsibility anymore. The calls continued for another week, increasingly desperate voicemails from Elaine, sometimes calling me selfish and heartless for not helping her son, other times pleading and promising that things would be different. Eventually, they became so frequent and disturbing that I had to block her number. Word reached me through mutual friends that Ryan had finally entered a rehabilitation program for alcohol dependency. I sent a brief, compassionate text wishing him well in his recovery, but making it clear that my boundaries remained firm. It was the only contact I initiated, and I made sure it couldn't be interpreted as an opening for reconciliation. 1 year after Ryan called off our wedding, I stood in my loft preparing for a dinner party. Looking around at the space I'd created, filled with art I loved, furnished according to my taste, reflecting my personality in every detail, I felt a surge of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The past year had transformed me in ways I could never have anticipated. Professionally, I had exceeded my own expectations. The senior creative director role had evolved into a partnership offer at the agency, giving me equity and a seat at the leadership table. My design blog had been featured in several industry publications, and I'd been invited to speak at 3 more conferences. The night class I taught had expanded to 2 sections due to high demand. The Technova project had led to a steady stream of high-profile freelance work, allowing me to be selective about the clients I took on and the projects I pursued. My financial independence was no longer just a reality, but a source of profound security. I'd gone from worrying about wedding expenses to consulting with a financial advisor about long-term investment strategies. My relationship with James had developed gradually and naturally. Unlike with Ryan, there was no rush to define things or meet external expectations. We enjoyed each other's company, supported each other's careers, and built a connection based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility. When he finally told me he loved me, 9 months into dating, the words felt like a confirmation of what we'd already built rather than a dramatic declaration. Most importantly, my relationship with myself had healed and strengthened. Therapy had helped me recognize and address patterns of seeking validation from others. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to recognize my worth, and to establish healthy boundaries. The woman who had once dimmed her light to please others now stood confidently in her full brightness. Not everything had been smooth, of course. There had been setbacks along the way, days when grief blindsided me, moments when self-doubt crept back in, times when the unfairness of what had happened threatened to overwhelm me. But those moments grew less frequent and less intense with time. The final confrontation with Ryan came unexpectedly, 6 weeks after his mother's desperate coffee shop plea. I was leaving a restaurant after a business dinner when I spotted him waiting beside my car. He looked thinner than I remembered, his once confident posture now hesitant and unsure. "Amber," he said quietly. "You look amazing." "Ryan, how did you know I'd be here?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. I asked Marcus. "I know I shouldn't have, but I needed to see you." I sighed. "What do you want?" "To apologize, properly. Not through my mother or friends. Face to face." He took a deep breath. "I made the biggest mistake of my life letting you go. I was weak and foolish, and I've paid for it every day since." Looking at him, this man I'd once planned to spend my life with, I felt surprisingly little. No anger, no longing, just a mild sadness for what had been lost. "I appreciate the apology," I said genuinely. "And I hope you're doing better." Marcus mentioned you were getting help. 2 months sober, he confirmed. "Working at my uncle's firm now. It's a step down, but it's a fresh start." "That's good. I'm happy for you." An awkward silence fell between us. Finally, he spoke the words I'd suspected were coming. "Is there any chance at all, that we could try again? I'm different now. I know what matters." I shook my head gently. "No, Ryan. That door is closed. Because of James? He asked, surprising me with his knowledge of my new relationship. Partly. But mostly because I'm different now too. What happened between us changed me, and I like who I've become. I wouldn't go back, even if I could. I understand, he said, though his expression showed he didn't. Not really. Can we at least be friends? I don't think that would be healthy for either of us, I replied. I wish you well, Ryan. I really do. But our paths need to stay separate. As I drove away, I felt the final thread connecting us snap. It wasn't dramatic or painful, just the quiet completion of a chapter that had ended long ago. The next day, I received one last voicemail from Elaine. I almost deleted it without listening, but something made me press play. Amber, it's Elaine. I won't call again after this. I just wanted to say, you were right. About everything. About Ryan needing to stand on his own. About respect being as important as love. I failed as a mother by not teaching him that. I'm trying to do better now to help him become the man he should have been for you. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. You deserved better from both of us. I saved the message, not out of any lingering attachment, but as a reminder of how far I'd come and the strength I'd found along the way. My healing journey hadn't been linear or simple. Therapy had been essential, helping me process not just the betrayal, but the patterns that had led me to accept less than I deserved. Self-care practices, from meditation to hiking to creative pursuits outside of work, had reconnected me with parts of myself I'd neglected. Most importantly, rebuilding my confidence had required daily acts of courage, each one reinforcing that I was capable and worthy. My relationship with my parents had deepened through the ordeal. Their unwavering support had shown me what unconditional love truly looked like. Weekly Sunday dinners with them became a cherished tradition, a time to share successes and challenges with people who valued me exactly as I was. My friendships had been transformed as well. Jessica, who had literally picked me up off the floor in my darkest moments, remained my closest confidant. But I'd also formed deeper connections with colleagues, neighbors, and fellow creatives, building a community that reflected my authentic self rather than adapting to fit someone else's world. At Jessica's wedding, where I served as maid of honor, I gave a toast that brought tears to many eyes. True partnership isn't about completing each other or fitting into someone else's mold. It's about two whole people choosing each other every day, supporting each other's growth, and standing together against whatever challenges come. I've learned that the hard way, but Jessica and Michael demonstrate it the right way every day. To love that strengthens rather than diminishes. Looking back, I can now see that Ryan canceling our wedding was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because he wasn't right for me, though he wasn't, but because the pain of that betrayal forced me to confront patterns and insecurities I might otherwise have carried through life. It pushed me to build a foundation of self-worth that no one can shake. The truth is, I'm not good enough. I'm far better than that limited assessment. I'm complex, flawed, resilient, and authentic. I've learned that my value isn't determined by someone else's family lineage or bank account or social connections. It comes from within, from my character, my talents, my capacity for growth and love. Sometimes rejection truly is protection. Sometimes the dreams that die make room for better ones to grow. And sometimes, the people who walk away do us the greatest favor of all. They create space for us to become who we were always meant to be. Have you ever experienced a rejection that ultimately led to something better? Share your story in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and self-discovery. Remember, you are worthy of respect and authentic love. Never settle for less. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to walk your own path, wherever it might lead.